So, good morning, everybody. My name is Kayvon. I head up Impact for Breakfast and have been doing so for almost a year. And my term is almost up. So, it's my great pleasure to be hosting this session because it intersects beautifully with all the things I think about: human agency, coherence, integrity, alignment. These are all things that are part of every step I take in the world. So we appreciate you all joining this morning. I'm going to give a little bit of background on the IFB and then hand it off to Florian to dazzle you with his just how he is and who he is. So um, IFB started about 18 years ago and started around a table with just a handful of people. It has since grown to over 6,000 members. More than half of those members are somewhere in the capital stack, meaning they hold the resources that generate momentum around great ideas. They are mission aligned, trying to generate social and environmental impacts. And we bring together great ideas, opportunities, and present them to galvanize the kinds of change that we want to see. So at this point, we have hosted more than 650 in-person and virtual sessions. In person in 49 chapters around the world. That's remarkable development over 18 years. And one global chapter, which you are all a member of. Thank you for joining. So the topic of human agency in the age of AI disruption is something that I see as a shift from I am what I can do to I am what I perceive, what I think, what I choose to do. We have two choices to make. One choice, two options. We can choose love or we can choose fear. And from love, we operate from abundance, and from fear, unfortunately, we operate from constraints. So Florian is going to talk to us about human agency and that underpinning everything that we can do, perceive, and choose. Thank you.
Thank you for the nice opening, Kevin. And yes, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us here. This talk is actually not about AI. It's about something much deeper. It's about agency, human agency. And actually also what it means to stay human in a world that's changing very quickly. As said before, we are in a disruptive time. So I would love all of you for a moment, can you close your eyes wherever you are? Hopefully not driving, then please leave your eyes open. And just remember what excited you as a child. Not what we are good at, but what others expected of you, what genuinely excited you. And I would encourage you, if you have something, for those wanting to, just on the chat room, put a word in. Would love to see how things go through if you just put one word on the chat of what excited you as a child. Thank you. Let me tell you a little bit about myself and my own journey. At the age of 18, I had two dreams. And my choice was here. One was to become a stand-up comedian, and the other was to make my parents proud. I guess you can think which one I chose because I'm not a stand-up comedian. And again, I chose the thing at its time as a Gen Xer, where most of us did, the things we had to do. And that is what I want to talk about today. Not success, but absence. This was not a bad choice. I chose responsibility at its time, stability, and approval. And I became really pretty good at living up to the expectations. However, that choice shaped how I defined success for a long period of time. So 15 years later, at the age of 33, I had achieved that second dream. Yeah, my choice had actually paid off. I was leading a company, having a family in the home. And this looked like success from an outside. And in many ways it was, but not honestly for me. That success came with a price. During a coaching session in my corporate life at this time, I learned about my inner child. I didn't even know that it existed because I was so happy with my inner adult, looking outside and coming up to expectations. And what came up through was not a strategy, was not ambition, but was something much more meaningful. That moment, I realized something painful. I had learned to make a living, but I had not learned to live my life. I actually realized that I had been the absent subject of my own education. I learned about everything else but me. So that cost, that absent it took cost. So when I figured it out, during that session, I recognized that I had an inner child, which I was not taking care of, things changed. Because once you see, you cannot unsee it. And I decided to walk away from my life, which was not mine. And that had a cost, a real cost. So a job that was not mine, a life that was not mine, and I was diving into personal development methodologies to understand, who am I? And awareness is not an idea, it comes with real consequences. Mine was to focus on impact lives and share profits later on, some years later. And just as I started about deeper questions, the world changed again. And artificial intelligence entered the system. The worldwide industrial revolution, 100 years later again. So that world has changed, but most people haven't. And the real risk today is not unemployment, because you have seen shifts, some tectonic shifts, as I said before, but it's actually to be economically unpositioned. Because AI has entered the system not as a tool, but as a force. And the world has changed, but most people have not. So I would love also for those being compelled on the chat very quickly, question is, who here feels the rules of careers have changed in the last month or year? If so, just put a yes. If don't think, you put a no. And if you don't know, let's try to explore this jointly. To give some perspective, that the old system was, you study, you get a job, you climb up the ladder, you promote it, and you increase your income. Sometimes long career jobs, many years in an organization. So the intention was you study, that you get an entry-level job at a good organization, and you want to have the better university and the best studies possible to do so. But that is no longer valid, because that was a knowledge-based system. So we studied hard and worked hard, studied hard over a long period of time to accumulate knowledge, and that knowledge was translated economically. But the knowledge-based economy is unfortunately over. So the real disruption is not in unemployment again, it is economic unpositioning. So the question now is actually, what is the return on a traditional education actually? Yeah. Now, early data shows that in 5 months, you can get the knowledge you need to actually succeed. You don't need 5 years because the knowledge is at your fingertip with AI. And also foreseeing that 1% of the population today are entrepreneurs, that will go over 20%. So there's a blessing in disguise, but it's fundamental changing. So if you understand that AI is breaking the career system, you've seen that large-scale displacements of white-collar work jobs are happening. But that also means that our children will no longer get their entry-level jobs the way we had in the past. And since the last industrial revolution, again, it was knowledge, but this has changed now. It is no longer. Because the AI gives you knowledge in seconds. It's cheaper, better, it means instantly, and extremely precise. So the real problem isn't the jobs, but it's actually career positioning. So if you understand that the old career system now is iterative, yeah, you have to experiment, you have to test. You don't know if it's just the job. But the real insight is that your identity is the most valuable economic asset. Yeah, in the new AI economy, important is not by what you know, but actually what you want, because then you can leverage the machine. We can ask the machine to cater once we know what we want. But if our youngsters will ask the machine for answers to where to find a job, how to make most money, yeah, then how bad is the world if humanity is suddenly subjugating itself to the machine, to some algorithms, some bots? And this is where I got really, really concerned. We're risking burnouts, mental health, and suicide. All this is exponentially growing. And for me, was an interesting information was about three weeks ago, of all companies, the CEO of Palantir published and said, in the AI world, in the AI economy, 2 people will succeed. It's neurodivergent people, because they think different and they want to do things different and they leverage the machine. Or purpose-driven people, because you know what your purpose is. You actually cater to it because the information is there and you can create things very fast, very cheap. If you don't, we go back to the Matrix movie, probably you swallow the wrong pill, which is a huge topic to tackle. So the insight is here that purpose is actually not found, but it's built. And it's built through decisions, actions, and iterations. And that's something I would like to walk you through a little bit, how things come. So here, our model is actually, if you vocate, means you dedicate yourself professionally to your vocation. So you align purpose and profession. This is what I call vocating. Because an action leads to a signal, and the signal needs an income. And this is how human agency actually becomes real and is scalable, once you know what you do. Not what you achieve, but you actually want to do. So the bridge is actually where vocating comes in, where you have an iteration, identity into action, action to a signal to income. If not, you go back and forth. You test and try. It is not the old way where you finish high school and grad school, and then you have companies waiting for you, and you get hopefully in the best company, the best entry-level job, and off you go. This is no longer the case. Because AI gives answers, but answers don't create outcomes. Execution does. But the infrastructure behind what we experience today. For years, people might have asked the question, how do I turn purpose into something real? And that is why we actually focus now on a vocating platform framework. And so more recently, the question is actually, how can I implement vocation professionally in the best way? So the invitation I have you here is for you to think and discuss now, and I will do some exercises, go through. How can you future-proof your next chapter before committing it? Because things have fundamentally changed. So let me invite you to some exercises. For those of being aware of the script comes from transaction analysis, it's deep psychology. That's what I learned in my session, in a corporate life, in my coaching session, about the inner child, the inner adult, and the inner parent, and the parent interference being a problem. Because when you're born, the first 2 years, your brain is still in development, and then thereafter you are cognizant, you understand what things are happening around you. And for every human, during the age of 2 to 6 years, something happens which marks your life. So I would like for you, all of you, to think through, what is the earliest child memory you can remember? And for those who have a memory, just put a thumbs up, please, in the chat. And for those not, which is normal, it took for me quite some time. It wasn't immediate. Is the piece of your script. So if you understand that normally that experience we have as a very young human being cognizant, is something normally we don't like. Sometimes it can be traumatic, doesn't have to be, but it's something we don't like and we don't have the filters, so we would like to fix it, solve for it. And that actually stays our entire life. And if we recognize this, and if we build on this and flip it in a positive way to contribute to the world, it is amazing, because this is where you build a true inner purpose, not opportunistically outside. There's a big difference between intuition and fantasy. Unfortunately, we are taught that success is fame, fortune, and power. It's all external related. And even if we have it and achieve it, thereafter is a cliff, because it will not help us to see or self-realize. If we stay on the inner child, using the inner adult and getting out of the inner parent interference, we're actually able to cater to our vocation as much as we do all the needs and things we need to do to make a meaningful life are actually possible. So after this exercise, I would like to, if you don't mind, to do a little meditation. And Kevin, I'm not good as you in the meditation side, so I forgive you. Please forgive me of doing things, but I would love to guide you through. Now, we looked at when we were a child. Let's look at the future. And so I would love to guide you through meditation before we go into the future, that we step out of the present. And so if you're sitting comfortably, you have the possibility, please do so. And then I will basically go through. So sit comfortably, rest your hands, and if you're comfortable, close your eyes. For those who wanting to leave them open, feel free to do so. Focus a moment on the breathing so that you concentrate it and be with us and look inside. I want you to imagine a moment many years from now. You are at the end of your life. Imagine yourself lying in your bed, no disease, no tragedy, just time to part. This is your final moment for your soul to take off from your physical body and move towards the light. Around you, in your room, around your bed, are people who mattered in your life. Colleagues, partners, friends, family. Look around and see how they all gathered to be with you. They are all here to your farewell and to reflect on your life. I want you to listen to them. What are they saying about you? What did you stand for? What impact did you have? Who did you become? And now notice something else. What are they not talking about? Your success, your titles, your gains, your status. What didn't matter in the end? Now, ask yourself one question. Did I truly live my life or someone else's life? And if there's a gap, when did this start? And why did it continue? Now slowly come back to your bed, back to your beloved ones, and back into our virtual room. But bring one thing with you: clarity. When you open your eyes, don't just return with a decision. What truly mattered in your imagined farewell? What did not matter? What would you regret not doing? And what does life worth living mean to you? Feel free to open your eyes whenever you want. That was one exercise I did some years back, and it literally opened my eyes. And I took some decisions. They don't have to be radical. They can be evolutive. They can be adjacent, or sometimes radical. Just to sense a little bit the room for those who have had a moment with some kind of a decision, please just post a thumbs up to our chat to sense a little bit what has happened afterwards. So another exercise is for you now to think. You went back to your childhood and your script. Some of you might have it, others might have to still work on it, which is all fine. Happened to me. Then go looking forward, thinking about the components and making your life meaningful. So if I bring things together now in today's life with certain identity I have, but also a skill set I have, a situation I'm in right now, if I had to reinvent myself today, can you just reflect, who would you speak to? What would you care about? And what stays with you? from the childhood. Just 30 seconds might be a word, a quick sentence. You might want to journal, you might put into a device, or just keep it for you. The intention here is, from that side, is that you want to identify what drives you at your core. What's your purpose? What are your strongest capabilities? What you've learned? What's your skill set between the inner child and the inner adult? And then you want to see where they align, or where there's a tension, in order to think what you would like to do. So if you were to reinvent yourself in the new AI age, to adopt yourself, because the disruption might go much further than we all think, what would you stop? What would you start? And what might you test is something which makes a good exercise. So on that side, I can just share very quickly, and I have to see if this works through my device even. I will show you a quick video on something I decided, because I did a radical pivot. And I'm not saying you should, but I had to, because of my children, actually. Because I have 5 Gen Zers, so I'm really concerned about that disruption of the labor world itself. And college is out. I have 2 youngsters going into college. Another one is still there. Other 2 are out. But that's a part where I was really concerned, because my question was, if human follow the machine and decide their life based on the machine, this is not what I want my beloved ones to do, and no human at all. So I was thinking, if I've been dedicating a portion of my life to inspire people to find their purpose and make it their profession, maybe there's a way I can actually leverage technology and AI to its greatest extent. So let me try to do the following. I will take off my, you can hear me, Kevin? Okay, and I will now go very loud with the machine, hopefully, and the video should go.
Millions of people are currently paralyzed by a very common, yet incredibly vague piece of modern advice. Find your passion. It leaves them staring at screens, trying to guess what they should do with their lives based on the highlight reels of others. The fatal flaw here is that people get stuck in an endless loop of thinking. Instead of looking at real evidence from their own lives, they rely on prestige-contaminated fantasy identities, chasing career titles simply because they sound impressive to other people, rather than because the actual daily work fits their personality. To break this cycle, we have to stop guessing and start building real signal. Welcome to the Vocating Engine. We are building the missing methodology layer between self-discovery and real-world economic participation. Our proprietary architecture is built on 4 measurable pillars. First is identity alignment. We help users build a rigorous, evidence-based understanding of their core drivers through an identity hypothesis, structured reflection, transcript-based voice reflection, and a personal theory of change, converting identity into a clear direction for impact. Reflection alone does not create direction. That is why the engine moves into our second pillar, action experiments. We test what feels true against structured evidence and practical choices through identity hypothesis testing, bounded corroboration using peer matching, pathway exploration, and action-oriented next step guidance that ensures the user always has a concrete, measurable next move. Once a working path is visible, we bridge insight into execution through external feedback. Users define a working vision and SMART goals, create timelines, and connect to high-quality peers through our smart peer matching, Progress is continuously monitored with revise if conditions to keep users on track. Finally, all this data gathering culminates in our fourth pillar, income signal. At its core is the vocating map, aligning passion, strengths, world needs, and paid opportunity. The system calculates the intersection, filtering validated signals to reveal a data-backed vocation hypothesis. Our vocating score then connects this signal directly to aligned paid opportunities, surrounding users with relevant collaborators and capital pathways to ensure long-term professional continuity and growth. This is not a black box hiring engine. It is a trusted, privacy-first iteration engine that supports users through transitions, redefinition, and measurable economic growth. Built with a Swiss-led posture, we retain no raw audio by default and operate entirely independent of advertising. We are building human agency infrastructure for the AI era. Powered by a proprietary methodology from the book On Vocation by Florian Kemmerich. Vocating, from self-discovery to economic participation.
Thank you. So I would therefore, Kevin, say, let me just do a little bit of a summary on that, and I would love then to open this stage. So just in a summary, you already know that something needs to change. We have to adapt. Yeah. The question is not clarity, but the question is why has nothing changed, and how do we have to change? It's a little bit reminds me of also when the pandemic happened. Yeah, that people were just thinking this is far away. Nothing will happen until it was all over the place. And that's the same exponentially, and exponentiality is just so overwhelming. So in the world ahead, nobody defines your path. You either design it or you drift. The difference is not insight, it is execution. What will be different in your life in the next 30 days, maybe that's something you should ask yourself because things go so fast. So this is where I encourage you and everyone to be aware of what is happening, to adjust yourself in order that the wave is not a tsunami hitting you, but you're actually able to ride the wave. Because this is happening as we speak. And therefore, I would welcome any conversations, any thoughts, anything you would like to share. And Kevin, I hope it wasn't too long. And I'm not on the receiving side. So I'm here sitting in front of my computer looking at a screen, but I just wanted to check how things are. And maybe if people want to come in with questions, comments, and to have some exchange, hopefully meaningful exchange.
Florian, brilliant. You and I have spent time talking about the depths of what you've developed. And one of the most beautiful things that you said to me is one of the exercises embedded in here is leading through exercises to hear excitement in a person's voice. What has them excited? You can't hide that. It comes from your vibration, right? From your throat. All roads lead to the throat. You can't hide that. So the inquiry that gets you to your excitement and says, hey, remember this is what you're excited about? That's an amazing thing, right? Because we can't bury that. In social interactions, when we get excited about something, we sometimes get a little bashful about it. This is personalized. It is yours. It is the users, They get to be excited and remember what they're excited about as their beacon. I love that about it. So please, this session is yours, everybody on the call. So please, anything you want to say. Ideally,
Also,
turn on the camera. Yeah.
Yes. Also, any reflection you have, any thoughts? Yes, Ovidio.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Florian, and also Kevin. Just few data points to first a comment. I think your timing is impeccable, and I think we are at the beginning of the disruption flow right now. So I think I want to commend you on your initiative. Second, I want to share some data points. Senator Mark Warner at the Semaphore event a few months ago mentioned that it is projected that the level of unemployment for college graduates from the US will rise from 6% to probably 23% just in a matter of years. And there is at the same time, because of this, a huge fight between the colleges right now for survival. So I think the world of education as we know it is going to be disrupted, specifically because that traditional logic of going through the education and then have a job waiting for you at the very end is being disrupted heavily. So I think we are going to see the need for this type of exercise, not only for French professionals, but also for a lot of fresh graduates. And I really appreciated the exercises that you share. Thank you so much for everything you shared.
So thank you for your comments. But again, this is the part where, even also based on that, I try to stay positive. I would like to do something despite, as we see the mankind in a real industrial revolution, internet was not. Because again, this was post First and Second World Wars were happening because of an industrial revolution at its time. And the difference between labor's unions and the ones owning and the role of government, but it was all about accumulating knowledge, and this is going away. So humanity has to understand how to deal with this. What is a new reality, and this is where I believe the big component is to see what are the things actually we can do where we can benefit from. And I think I wasn't brought up knowing about who am I, what my script is, what my type of personality is, because there are certain things in there. And maybe their blessing in disguise is that now it will force humans to do so, because otherwise the risk of you ending up somewhere which you don't know why, because you were looking at a screen, you got some information, and you made some decisions based on that, is actually the beauty. Maybe there's more and more people to figure that out. And I'm also interesting to hear, neurodivergent people, what the CEO of Palantir said, because those were in the old system marginated, difficult. ADHD, HP people of, really different things which wouldn't fit into the system were marginated, were actually punished. And nothing to do with how smart someone is or not. And maybe in that new system, there is actually a possibility because they might have smart ideas, incredible ideas, and come up. My also hope is that this old difference between the global north and the global south, which is so colonial, when we privileged people show up to help someone where nobody wants to be helped. Actually, from a dignity point of view, don't help me. I mean, why? Put yourself at the same level. And that is something where I can see the blessing of technology resolving access and affordability. So anyone with access to device with some thoughts and some ideas can actually create to do so. And that's why I hope, again, there's a rough ride first coming, because people will not know what to do, and they might not be equipped or encouraged to take some risks in trying it out, but you will be forced to. And this is where, of course, you have to have the stamina and be prepared to dare to test and to do, not out of desperate situation, but really to saying, this is what I fully believe, and I will continue trying to do this.
I think some people have no choice, and that's obviously they will choose that path. But to your point about the South, MIT was the first school to open up with online courses. Their toughest course, electrical engineering, for both enrolled students and also everyone around the world. And I will not ask you to guess the country of the student that performed the best virtually was Mongolia.
Wow.
Talking about accessing and tapping into new tools and available and democratizing knowledge and everything, and the focus on experimentation and actually execution.
Interesting insights, Ovidio.
Yes.
So anyone other has questions, has comments? Audrey, please.
Yeah, thank you, Florian. I guess I want to ask a question about really the mechanics of, what especially young graduates are going to be facing. A lot of conversations around AI refer to this, to the forthcoming singularity, which is that moment when we stop being able to discern the difference between AI generated content and human generated content. And I mean, it's come much faster. It's coming. I think we're quite nearly there. Different experts put different timelines on this. And I just wonder, in practical terms, especially for the young, like a lot of the conversations that I have with friends and peers, I guess circle around, well, the next generation, the next, graduate pools, if they can't maintain that sense of true self, identity, and maybe creativity, because all the analytical writing skills, the social sciences, and some of the technical sciences, especially computer engineering and coding, is being completely upended, right? You don't really need humans to do this anymore. So there's this like underlying assumption that there's still going to be some cachet and value in human creativity, but as singularity approaches, what does it, I mean, I don't want to take us off piece, but how do we continue to value human generated creation, content, music, poetry, design? Is there going to be a way that there is some sort of a premium or some sort of a value that continues to be attributed to human content? And I say this mainly because like people are generating fictional books in like, a matter of 20 minutes, posting them online and selling their books. Now, who wants to read that? Yeah, I just wonder what your thoughts are on the impending moment, what that means for the really practically like the jobs in this economy.
It's a very valid question, Audrey. Now, what we might believe has worked in the past might actually not have. Of a world of 8 billion people, where 1 billion is good off and the other 7 billion are not, because they didn't have access and couldn't afford, to get knowledge and get the finances to it in order to create. Yeah, we have a lot of artists, which we believe brain artists at the end, which bailed out and couldn't do the art. So maybe there's a silver lining here, that actually knowledge and being paid for knowledge from an economical point of view wasn't maybe very effective. And maybe there was so much greater ideas on creativity, on design, on art, which didn't never see the light, because you would have had to have the money and the access to the knowledge and education in order to do so. Otherwise, nobody would have seen that. And as we are now democratizing on whatever music, and you go to, Spotify, and you become an artist and you push it out, and now AI caters to it, because we have seen the first unicorn now where it's one employee. Yeah, just with a great idea coming up, which was impossible. So I don't know that this is necessarily something bad, that everyone else who could and would create as of early age based on a script of doing something has the possibility to do so, which wasn't in the past, because either was shut off by the education or by the parents, or because not having the financial means and the information to do so. And so that's a fine line. Now, what I hope for, and I don't have a crystal ball, Audrey, I cannot say what will happen, but what I hope for is actually a balance. If you do not have to study 5 years, many hours, to hammer knowledge into your head, make out you can spit it out. Yeah, most of it you forget over time anyway. Yeah, for you to have the credentials to get this job or that job, which was in the past, if we can learn in 5 months all the tools and all the information I need actually to succeed on creating something, and if we have maybe a balance, and then some of the AI schools actually do that, that you have 3 hours of education and educating online with AI, but then the rest of the hours you actually go out in nature and you implement and you do, which AI to AI will not do, because it doesn't make sense. So then my hope would be actually that the quality of life increases. Maybe also, maybe I'm a dreamer, maybe there's suddenly a universal income can actually make sense. Yeah, because you don't generate economic value if you don't have a consumer to do so. Yeah, if now whatever humanity decimates to 1/3 because people will starve or will kill each other or whatever that might be, that's maybe a scenario. But what if we are actually in a possibility that economic, you can have an economic through eyeballs. Yeah, it shouldn't make people dependent and then sick mentally afterwards. But so there are certain things where maybe the new world we would see so negatively and so concerned, and I am also concerned, just to be very clear. I'm afraid. But maybe there's something very positive in it. So the way to learn much more efficiently, much more equitable, much more just from anywhere in the world, not only the lucky born people like us, yeah, who happen to come from a privileged position, but really anyone everywhere. So those are the things. And of course, it will be a rough ride. And as Ovidio was saying before, the education system will be disrupted totally because it is inefficient, it is expensive, and it's exclusive. Yeah, because others wouldn't, the large majority of the population of the world doesn't have it. So I am not sure, but those are my thoughts. I hope it makes sense, Ore, and I'm answering your question.
Yes, thank you.
Amy, I know you have a question.
Thank you, Keyvan. Thank you, Florian. I just wanted to ask a question from the perspective of I work in development aid, and in what you were just saying about the part of the world that doesn't have access. I'm very afraid for all the divides that we've talked about until now. Now it's going to be even more. And we're creating this world in terms of those who have access versus those who don't, and kind of entrenching ourselves in this as a global society. It's interesting. So I'm not sure what my question is, but it's just kind of a reaction too about it's interesting as we think about building skills for young people in the world, and the World Economic Forum says, I think it was last year they put out like the top 10 skills that young people should have. And of course, there's digital literacy in there, but there's empathy, critical thinking, environmental stewardship. And yet we have this this force, as you say, that's come into the picture quite rapidly. And as we think about helping young people in communities where they haven't had access, they've been outside of these conversations or kind of introductions to AI, and we're teaching them skills, it strikes me that instead of all of the training that we've repeated, and sometimes to detriment, we just keep repeating the same thing. It's really about how do you get young people who maybe have ideas for solutions. They haven't been kind of corrupted by other people's ideas of how to solve their community problems, like the ways that they should do it. Maybe it's about experiential learning and trying to draw more on that. I mean, I feel like the development community is also racing to try to push AI and introduce AI in terms of digital literacy, but there's such a incredible space for positive deviance in communities and working with young people to come up with solutions that haven't been kind of tainted by someone else's thinking for them. And just kind of, curious your reactions to that, or how we kind of fight that battle a little bit. Because the development organizations, the aid organizations are also being pushed to stay on top of these new trends and forces that are being pushed out there?
Yeah, Amy, it's a great comment. And again, I am biased on it because I've been in my previous life in impact investing. We were investing or trying to invest in these areas. And you had the soft power age coming in, sometimes deviating, sometimes distorting some markets. It's a fine line. Having clearly said that there is an area of where you need to give people fish because otherwise they die. And unfortunately, this is a hardship now. We all know this with all the changes happening. And then there's also the component of teaching how to fish. Now, do we privileged people have to travel there to teach them to fish? Probably no longer. Technology has a different pathway. And then, of course, there's investing in the fishing business, Yeah, it's then the third one when you look at an investment for impact investing. So, Amy, but one of the big things I believe the transformational ones, and we actually on the app we're developing here, doing that, is you don't need to read and write to get educated. So our app is only talking any language, any dialect in any part of the world. Of course, we start in English and these things, but again, it's agentic AI. It can adapt to any dialect, anything, respecting local traditions, respecting a local language. And I happen to sit on the board of a company called Goodwall. Yeah, Goodwall has a platform, of course, pushing out AI literacy actually to Gen Zers, specifically in Africa, for free. Yeah, and then you see what they do on the app, just itself on the videos, how they transform their life just to getting access. Nobody has to teach them necessarily because they learn online very quickly. So how blessed can this be that suddenly you have a creator or an inventor who speaking to a phone, a feature phone, not a smartphone, which answers in their dialect in the same way, and therefore you start actually to have an idea, start to create a business because you need necessary information in order to do this in the best way possible. So those are the things where I'm just saying there's a fine line where I can say, yes, probably the old education system is unfair, inefficient, yes, and only caters to privileged people. Maybe, yes, the old economy is unfair, caters only to the privileged. Yeah. And maybe with the new AI coming in, yeah, and speaking, not needing to read and write, even you could, of course, learn to read and write through that, most likely. So maybe there's a way, it has a positive effect, but Amy, I do not know because, again, history has shown every 100 years when you have a industrial revolution, first of all, there is an economic depression, you have uprisal, you have wars, and then humanity figures out actually how to deal with the new reality. And that's what I'm really afraid of because it all points to that direction. It's not depending on this person, that person, or that person. It is really something which goes since since social media kicked in, and we all mass manipulated and we all fed with information. And so it's difficult to differentiate what is true or what is not, what my opinion is, am I tainted or not, whether it's fake news or not, it doesn't really matter because something has changed. The effect on you has happened. Yeah. And so those are the things where I hope that AI might be a segue in a really, truly fairer access and affordability for people to actually create and generate. And maybe that will outweigh overall economically. So I'm less concerned about the global economy because companies get more and more efficient. And you need less and less capital and less time and know-how to actually create or do a startup. That's why they say they will go from 1% to over 20%. Yeah, in terms of the entrepreneurship side, because it's very different now to do this. So in the same sense, there is a space where to safeguard by regulations, the AI Act in Europe is one. Yeah, the US is the wild, wild west because you can do whatever you want so far for the time being. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Whether kill people or not doesn't matter. Whether you do something on a platform which is psychology and might actually affect people of suicide, it's just what it is. Yeah, so there has to be some guardrails. Otherwise, the tech animal is so big that I'm really scared about. But I'm not sure that I'm answering your question, but I believe there is a notion in where we, based on our learning we have on the past, might not truly understand the levers and the benefits of the things coming up now in terms of being honestly fair and less divisive and privileged.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And I also think it's, to your point, it's in terms of listening to a voice or young people being able to connect with other young people. I mean, there's a connection thing that is also very valuable as well. So where that can kind of drive relationships too. So thank you.
My big concern is if it's only screen, yeah, we're ending up in the matrix. People are plugged in and just living in a virtual world. That is, of course, terrible. Yeah, so there's a notion of I get information from online, but I want to do something in the real world with it, and spend some time and quality. Those are the pieces. And another thing is also what I've learned is you cannot create if you don't cut out noise. You have to go inside. You have to connect with yourself, which is in today's time very difficult because we're always connected with something ring buzzing, something new information. The other day I read, this was actually 10 years ago, really, that a person with the age of 40 in the 1970s has less information per day given to him or her as a 10-year-old child today because they're connected. So the overflow of information and the short span is so drastic that I think a big portion is to keep the balance between being connected and disconnecting, just for your own mental health.
I have so much to say, but I know others have questions, comments. Please feel free to just unmute and ask and comment.
Has Michelle spoken because she raised her hand?
Thank you, Michelle.
It was somewhat answered a little bit tangentially, but I know, Florian, that you come from, you mentioned impact investing and the interface with the humanitarian sector, and you also are sitting there in Geneva, and I was curious about what you're seeing happening in that particular sector with respect to the issues that you've raised.
So if you believe with USAID in DC, there was an earthquake, probably it's nothing compared to the size and the impact of Geneva. Because DC is much more bigger and there's much more things. Yeah. Also from a government point of view, from an economic point of view, compared to Geneva. Yeah. And so here, where Geneva, you have, of course, the left bank and the right bank. And the right bank typically is the international Geneva, and the left bank is where the old town, but also all the banks, the financial sector sit, and the trading platforms typically sit. And here, the right bank is extremely hard hit right now. You have about, I think, 4,000 families left the city last summer. It might be another 4,000, in a sense that even the city of Geneva has put money aside trying to keep some of them and how to salvage the city of peace role and gravitas as the UN is basically moving elsewhere and cutting down, but also many other international organizations. And this is where you can see that the trend of building bridges, where the original conference was created in 2017, was actually caused by Trump at its time, by slowly not funding things. And then the right bank says, we need to talk to the left bank, private capital engagement. And I was there as an impact investor in between, basically on the bridge, trying to bridge it. And now, of course, it's massive. This is also when we talk about vocating and someone being dedicated to its vocation, it's hard for me to see that people and families suddenly, because of economic reasons, to pay their bills, keep their livelihood actually, because you're disrupted and thrown out of an ecosystem which was pretty stable so far for many years. And then basically to see, okay, I need to get any job. So I'm not able to stay on something which is actually catering to my inner child and to my vocation. So this is the part where it's hard to see. and I'm hopeful also. My intention, if there's anything we can do to help, I'm totally up for it. But yes, it is massive in Geneva specifically. I hope I answered your question.
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't see where to raise my hand in the Zoom, but I still wanted to jump in and make a comment if I can. I do come from a developing country, Colombia, and I had the chance to work for the past 7 years in New York in sustainable finance and like impact investment a little bit. But I'm in a very particular situation because I feel like I'm in the intersection between all of these worlds that you're talking about. Like, I was working at the UN Pension Fund, and it because of layoffs and everything, I was impacted. I'm back in my home country, and I'm rethinking a lot about my career, my life. So, like, thinking at two levels, both the professional level that I have the experience and I can see from the like a different perspective, the developing country and the developing world, but also I am heated and impacted by this. I am like early career, let's say. I have 10 years of experience, so like I am seeing these happening right now in my life. All of this to say, like, I have a lot of questions for you, but one of it is like the first reflection that I have is what you were saying. Yes, like one thing is like I've been looking to pursue my passion on like sustainable development and everything, but the reality is that like there's not like the world is impacted, and it's hard to find that opportunity now. And sometimes we do have to work on things that we just don't want to, and that's the reality. Mostly also for people in developing countries that are not that doesn't have the chance or the privilege to pick what their passion is and pursue it because of what you were saying, economic necessity. So that assumption that you will find the economic opportunity to pursue your passion is like a big one, especially in developing countries. And I'm really curious about what do you think, like, if you have inputted that assumption in your application in terms of accessibility and affordability, like how do you input that on your own perspective? And then the other question that I have is like from the impact investment world, do you think there is like opportunity to like redirect or like restructure like the allocation of resources towards like these new needs? And I mean, because traditionally impact investment in developing countries in Latin America are focused either on financial services or agricultural services, but not that much in like training or retraining or preparing taking the opportunity that the technology is giving to prepare youth for these new challenges.
Wonderful question, María. Gran gusto estar en contacto. Yo vivo aquí con una casa mexicana en Ginebra.
Thank you. Very nice to meet you.
Yes. So, María, as I understand, there are three components. Number one is in the development sector. Yes, of course, the development sector was very much looking at a theory of change or what to develop, which goes very inherent with a purpose. That is beautiful. But that same purpose, you can perfectly apply it in a private sector. And that's actually what I would like to encourage people. Yeah, as much as someone usually studying finance, and I had this discussion with I did a workshop at Oxford University, the MBA students there, where I talked about how to align purpose and profession. And he said, Florian, I've studied so hard to do to learn financial modeling. AI is taking over. I'm doomed. I have no future. And then we worked actually on first time ever for him on his purpose. Because what would you do? If you're good at math and you want to earn money, you go to finance. There's no self-realization in. Yes, you have material things and you can buy stuff, and your successes. That same happens, but on the other side. Yeah, as long as you are working in a pretty stable sector, yeah, which is taxpayer money funded, yeah, by governments, yeah, which have the development aid work, or donations from others, yeah, you were working in a silo. Impact investing wasn't really. Yeah, we were actually sitting in between. So you had the finance, the private capital, and then the non-for-profit capital. And that's the part actually where I believe there's a lot we can be done on both sides. But again, so on your question, if it's about yourself and yourself, you can continue your vocation beyond the development sector. Yeah, and there's a way you can actually do exercise and find that. The second thing is now what we're seeing is as the disruption is not only through AI, but also coming into the development and aid sector, that actually finally two silos can start to think about risk, reward, return. Where do you need money and for which one? And how concessionally or how much is from donation over from fully concessionally down to fully commercial? What are the nuances? So there's also a lot of ideas coming up and a lot of things being pushed on that. And this is where I would actually encourage you to not think about your sector as development, the development sector as a sector only, but to look what is your underlying theory of change. What is it, what you would like to contribute? What's your identity? And then widen the scope, because you might find amazing things in Colombia or somewhere else. Yeah, and I happen to know Colombia quite well. So on that side, am I answering your question? If not, Audrey I'm sure she has something to come in here.
Oh, I'll let Maria answer first.
No, I would love to hear what you have to say.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure I'm able to really answer what you asked, but one thought as I heard you speaking, Maria, and it reminded me of the mentality with which I was raised in an immigrant household, which was that, pursuing your passion is a luxury. That pursuing your passion is the realm of the wealthy, the independently wealthy. As that shifts and changes with the ability to access tools and information, and we look at the very real constraints of the real economy and the cities in which we're living, where there are cases of, mass exodus and a lot of unemployment, I just wonder whether this isn't also a matter to be raised with public financiers and with governments. Coming back to my quasi-socialist communist comment earlier in the chat about universal basic income, my father would have called me a communist for suggesting that. I'll say, isn't it, it will not have been a grand success in the grand scheme of things when all the basic measures of human quality of life and happiness plunge in the wake of massive disruption. And I was involved with a large academic study on quality of life that covered absolutely every part of the world, from experts who studied objective and subjective indicators of well-being. And it almost always is tied to community, social capital, and some ability to be involved in generating your own income, not being given payouts. So is it not the role? Is there not a fundamental responsibility, when you look at all the basics of human development indices and all of that, of government, to be then putting in place some of the structures and the vehicles, including maybe cooperative structure, new age cooperative structures and stuff that does yield payouts when we are going to be losing all information age jobs outside of the real economy, outside of the wires and the plumbing and the food preparation and the undertakers. I just think that, we're missing a beat here if we're not putting governments squarely at the center of the conversation in terms of their responsibility in allocating public finance for this type of challenge.
I fully agree, Audrey, but the reality, it goes exactly in the opposite. And this is circle-wise. Yeah, even Socrates was killed for not being in favor of a democracy. Yeah, because again, since Plato, this was all clear that when a democracy goes to its maturity, it is the constituency entitled, which go against the other. Someone takes over, it becomes a tyranny. Yeah, because you're no longer voting for the best leader. Yeah, you're voting for the best salesman. Yeah, having the nicest stories and promising the biggest future. Yeah, and then afterwards you're living the consequences, which might bring some bells to some leaders today. Yeah, and then you end up with a tyranny, and then you end up with civil unrest, civil war, and you go back into democracy. So right now we are unfortunately in a pivot where the likelihood for governments to actually do something is less and less. Yeah, because you have mega forces forcing others. Yeah, and that is unfortunately, for me, I mean, we can have the calling we want, and we want to call in the governments to do something. I agree. And for me, it would be actually to regulate internet stuff. Yeah, let's say whether this is, privacy, whether this is AI, which in Europe is some, the rest of the world is none. Yeah, or you have in China some very strict rules, by the way. Also child protection. There are certain things in there where you could say, it's actually not too bad. But again, those are things where it becomes very philosophical, which doesn't resolve the issues of our youngsters, going through rough times to actually find a job, and high youth unemployment.
Yeah, but again, we're not talking about philosophy here. We're talking about the responsibility of our political leaders to ensure that there is some sort of, I don't know, whether it's structures to feed people and give them opportunities, the premium that should be placed on all human generated content, that it should be differentiated despite the singularity happening. And then, I mean, finally, just looking at, well, we're seeing this movement in some ways, to Nancy's comments in the chat about governments are stepping forward now, a little late for any one of us with over 10-year-old kids, but where a lot of these terrible platforms are being banned. Finally.
Yes.
Right.
I agree.
So it's not all one direction, I think.
Which goes to a question here from Nancy, actually. Yeah, Nancy mentioned the risks or the impact, the terrible impact of actually porn, or platforms like OnlyFans here. But again, this goes to human nature also. Now, of course, unfortunately, it's much, much younger because of the, access on the platforms. And this is where I believe it's important to have a clear cut, nothing between 12. Yeah. Protect the youngsters and then gradually come into the digital world, which they have to. But the other side is also you see people when they have a midlife crisis. Why is it typically a midlife crisis in a privileged country, in a privileged society, where people have some wealth gathered, and then they say, hey, hold a second, life passes, and you have two extremes. You have the ones going crazy on OnlyFans and whatever, or you have others going actually spiritual, saying, hold a second, what is it? To cater to your inner child. This is why I believe the important part is actually that within an educational system, we should be aware and trained about our own script. So that we understand it, we leverage it from. We should be trained to understand what inner child and inner adult means, and to have and to build the life on that without inner parent interference, for example. We should be trained on personal development, what type of person I am, to really understand me, which all exists there. And those are things, because then the deliberate choice of people will be in a better way. So therefore, I think goes always back to awareness. Why are people doing certain things? Because you want to numb out the pain, because your life is fragile, whether this is any compulsive reaction, whether this is shopping, whether this is alcohol, whether this is smoking, drugs, or whatever, or porn, is an overreaction because of a problem amongst the balance between the three inner personalities we have. And that's something we can actually solve for. Even bipolar disease, for example, and I happen to have that in my family, is also when the inner adult is not enough developed, that there is a conflict between the inner parent, critical parent and a child, and it goes up and down. And what do? Medicine gives a drug just to make the person flat, rather than having being conscious and resolving for it. Joel, you came in.
Hi, Florian, and greetings from Geneva too. What I find this very interesting, and I think maybe the question that I'm asking here is related more to my professional experience, which is within the UN system, particularly the humanitarian dimension. I see huge risks within AI of accelerating some of the fissures that we're already seeing, and accelerating those fissures even further, particularly around things that drive conflict. Obviously, the classic issues we have around how we address information and disinformation management and so on. And I'm curious, from your perspective, having seen how the impact investment world works and being probably very familiar with the UN system, how the UN system can adapt and build an architecture that maybe brings out more of the positive rather than the negative. I am pretty skeptical about the ability of the UN to do that, just based upon my experience of seeing how it's managed, how decisions are made, and how there's a real lack of vision in a lot of areas, but particularly within AI. Organizations want to use AI, or say that they want to use AI, but then how they then understand the social impacts of that, I haven't seen a huge amount at the broader institutional level. So I'm curious to see what your perspective is on that, and where maybe the humanitarians and the development colleagues, the few of us who are left, can consider the types or think about the principles that we need to incorporate in our work, and the way that maybe we need to redesign our institutions.
So Joel, thank you for your question. Now, one thing is, I've lived last year an adoption in a company where it's a service company, which UN is, true, where we flipped the pyramid. We inverted the pyramid. Yeah, we were forced to from a profitability point of view, because the USAID earthquake was going through, and certain things and certain projects were no longer there. We were there in the Impact Investor Advisory, and we were forced to see what we can do. And one piece was just to hop on AI and flip the company. We divided the costs by 5. 70% of the people leave, especially young people, because there's no value given. Yeah, it was brutal. Before that, you had actually the people in between, in the middle levels, fighting it, saying AI doesn't, I've tried GPT, it doesn't work, that it's not good enough, only I know. And this is a path where you compete with the machine and you will absolutely lose it. So if I were the UN, and this is brutal, you restructure in a way where you lower your cost of doing the business. So the taxpayers' money is spent more on doing the impact on the ground and less of feeding big machinery, of privileged people, nicely living, in nice parts of the world, and then traveling around. Yeah, now this is the part of it. Again, the UN has clearly some absolutely critical missions. Yeah, and this is where it's not black and white. But as technology kicks into every areas, corporations, governments, and everything, and they're all looking at how to reduce the cost of doing business, cost of delivery of the service. Yeah, it is brutal. And that's why you see it said 40% of all white-collar jobs will be wiped out worldwide. Over 500 million people in the next 3 years. And whether it's 3 years or 5 years or whatever, you can argue. But again, it's happening, whether it's 20% or 50%, it's actually a huge amount of numbers. But also those organizations which resist and are not sure, and I have a AI, policy now, and I've said everybody, no, only ChatGPT, no Claude, and we have to things. All of that doesn't work. You have to flip the entire thing. You do the SOP. You automate absolutely everything you can. You use agentic AI, not just your own know-how, that you have it in the most adaptive and learning fast way, because it will increase the efficiency of your organization. So that would be my response to the UN. knowing how they work and how they fight for, their donor countries, and where the money is, and whether this agency and that the other agency. There's a lot of inefficiency in it. Yeah, but my hope is that UN stays strong. My hope that UN comes up with programs where you continually say, out of X amount of money, that is paid to operate, and the other portion is paid to actually live on the ground, and what that would mean. Yeah, those are the things, because we were living in silos in the past. Life was okay. Yeah. And that's where actually also the UN grew and grew and grew and grew. Yeah. Of course, not the last 10 years probably, but that's something that goes also back to the attitude of the people, Joel. You have people which are mission driven, or people are just shining because it's very important. I'm with the UN and I help the poor, and I'm not sure whether you're working for the poor or of the poor, it's another question to have. So there's a fine line of self-criticism, which goes also in the impact investing sector, to just see disruption comes in, things are changing, and you have to adapt. There's no other way. Yeah. And you better embrace it and try to change the system within. I hope I'm answering your question, Joel.
Yeah, and maybe it's a question of competition as well between the agencies that better adapt and can demonstrate value for money, will maybe win. But I think it's also beyond just the value for money discussion. It's about how we responsibly engage. I know the ITU does a lot of this work, and I've tried to engage in some of their stuff. But I think it's also about what is the role of the UN in bringing member states together to agree certain minimum standards, to agree pathways away from that allow the shift to occur with minimum amount of collateral damage. How you, in my instance with the UNHCR, how you ensure that refugees are part of that discussion, and engage in that in a way that's equitable and can actually benefit from the potential technologies. So yeah, I think I can definitely see the point that there needs to be massive, and that includes myself, restructuring and reduction of headcount in Geneva and beyond. But then there's also that other bit of how we build the architecture that supports a better AI reality.
And competition usually leads to that. Yeah, competition is actually good. I think we're over time already. Time is flying. I'm giving back to you, Kevin. Maybe just to wrap it up.
Amazing, Florian. As you know, I really appreciate these conversations. I've been working in developing countries for 20 years and understanding the challenges there intimately, and change brings about fear. And I notice in this conversation, we went from connecting with agency and self to make better decisions that are more coherent from us, to then shifting to the fear, right? Fear is also an incredible motivator, right? It's a motivator to change, to adapt. The choice of love is the direction that we can give ourselves. Beyond the concept of it, I put in the chat flying, was my thing as a child. I just put my arms out and would run around. That's a place of possibility. We are again also in a place of amazing possibility. It is not happening to us from fear, it's happening to us. From love, it is happening for us. So connecting with that place, because there will be more and more disruption, whether it's AI or anything else you put in that field. Things are going to happen for us. To connect with human agency, to understand the choices that serve us, is critically important. And I really appreciate that this is the foundation of the platform you've built and are building. And I know there's so many more conversations to be had around this. I know that we will continue these concepts at IFB and beyond. So in closing, I'd love to say that it's a privilege to be part of this. It really is. We are going to share the video with everybody on the list. Those who were not able to make it, they'll receive it too. We will have in there our contact information so we can continue these conversations and understand where there's areas where we can have traction and build momentum for what we want to see. I thank you all very much. Thank you, Florian, so much. Thank you, Audrey. We will be in touch soon with a thank you note with all the links. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.